Politicians on a microphone, I think. That's tough.
Right. And we're trying to find out if DHCA has the ability to come back this afternoon. Thank you.
We just gave you $5 million.
I mean, we could do.
You should be here all day. Yeah. We're gonna start taking back dollars if you stay.
I'm just saying, I mean, you may not be able to determine quickly, so it doesn't matter. We can set 2 o'clock, and then we can tell Park and Planning, 2:30.
Oh, okay.
And, yeah, it's MNC PPC. Okay.
Yeah.
If that works for you, we'll do that. Thanks. Okay, and now we'll do the budget for the Housing Opportunities Commission. Not sure if.
We love you guys.
Okay, all right.
There's $6 million if you want to just.
Oh, yeah?
No, there's $6 million. Nah.
Okay.
Okay. See, we have 2 issues related to HOC. Shouldn't take that long. So this is the funding that is in a non-departmental account in the operating budget that is provided to HOC each year to really support resident services. As we've discussed, we support HOC in a lot of different ways, through the HIF and through payment in lieu of tax arrangements and all kinds of things. But this money is provided by the county to really help support resident services that federal funds otherwise would not really support. There's insufficient support that way. So for FY20, it's $6.88 million. It's a 1.6% increase. The executive in making this recommendation, you'll see, took into account compensation adjustments and some adjustments for rental license fee changes, but also then did ask HOC to participate in the 2% reduction, which they did, and so the net change is about $107,000. HOC has provided a table on page 2, which shows you their expected uses for the funding. HOC has a different budget process. It's so they don't make their final approval of the budget until June. And so every year they provide us what they expect they would use the money for, but you just need to know that it's not final until the commission acts on it in June and how the funds would be distributed. And I've also attached for you as background some information from their FY19 approved budget, just to emphasize that this is a portion of HOC's funding, but the main portion of their very large budget actually comes through federal programs and through the revenues from housing programs, housing choice vouchers. So their total revenues and expenditures in their last approved budget was over $264 million. And so when I know HOC, even in their statements, is always thankful to have the county support, but HOC's funding really comes from other sources. The majority of their funding comes from other sources. And I also attached the information because it has their strategic plan and their vision, and I thought that that might be useful for you to have. And I would recommend approval, and I'd let Mr. Spann give you any comments that he wanted to about the background on the plan and spending.
All right.
Well, I'll spend less time on the actual line items because, as usual, Ms. McMillan lays it out spectacularly. Again, my name is Stacy Spann. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Opportunities Commission of Montgomery County. Proud to be that. And to my left is Terry Fowler, who's our Budget Director. Does a spectacular job every year of making sure we come before you with facts. And then behind me is Fred Swan, who is the Director of our Resident Services team. And so I'll start by thanking Ms. McMillan for attaching our strategic plan. While it is skinnied down in terms of prose, the weight of it still holds. And it boils down to a couple things. HOC is simply in the business of getting people housed, keeping them housed, and helping our families and customers reach their fullest potential. It's that simple. And so what that means is that we are working diligently to make sure we develop and deliver hard units, as well as subsidies that keep people attached to housing. But what we've learned over many years is that it is that housing by itself is not enough. It's the services from our resident services team and other partners in this county that really keep folks appended to those communities and thriving. And so, as usual, want to thank the County Council for its indulgence, its support of us and our programs. And then I'll also say we appreciate the challenges that you lay before us, even if we're not always able to meet them in the way that you'd like. So.
Okay. Can you, regarding your goal of 1,000 new units by 2022, how is, first of all, is that that's 1,000 affordable units in your strategic plan? So that's not counting your market rate portion, I would assume?
Well, it counts the whole thing, because the way that it works for us is the reason we can have a budget that has, it's $264 million-ish and the county support amounts to just under $7 million is because we're able to get to garner rents from our mixed income portfolio. We could never support keeping people housed or helping families reach their fullest potential with only the rents from.
You need the revenue stream from the
Correct.
mix of incomes.
Correct.
As well as creating a healthier community to live in. Okay, so the 1,000.
Be affordable though.
Yeah, so the 1,000 goal, what share of that is?
Well, typically, we're guaranteed to have 20%. We focused and try to have somewhere in the order of 45% of those units be affordable. Now, this year was unusual. We were able to pick up 4 properties that left to the market's devices and without the right of first refusal, without the support of DHCA, they would have been sold in the private sector and ultimately become less affordable for families. And so there were 3 Willows properties, and you've talked about Cider Mill. I can tell you as we've run the numbers, particularly on Cider Mill, given the cost, that is not a property that we're going to actually make money on. We are keeping the vast majority of those units affordable. The median already is at less than 60%. And so what we did was guarantee those families the opportunity.
Median rent in the cider mill at the market, at the price that, at what they're paying now, is what you consider affordable for 60% of AMI.
Correct. And so it is a naturally occurring affordable property. It's 40 acres, a little over 40 acres, 864 units. It's massive, but well worth the consideration and effort that we've invested to make sure that we maintain that affordability. So
just with that,
we've
achieved the goal.
No, we did.
Yeah. Okay.
We beat the goal just with those 4 acquisitions. But our pipeline's robust. As you know, we've got 3-4 transactions in Silver Spring alone, and then a number of others that are coming online as well. So we were fortunate. So we have to readjust. Apparently, we shot pretty low.
Okay.
The goal.
All right. Any questions, Mr. Jawanda?
You want to go? Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Thank you, Mr. Span. Thank you. Good to meet you, Terry and Fred, and good to see you. And Pofin, good to see you. Thank you for coming through. I think we've got to do a blue sky moment here and set the bar higher. Because we got a lot of and there's a question coming, but that's great that we're going to based on the pipeline we're already going to exceed that. And great for the update on Cedar Mill. My question is, and we've talked about this, can we be bolder, with the goals? And is this, and it's not just you, I say we, I mean the county, and I don't mean just HOC, but you as a partner. And realizing you guys have done great work, and we're probably at the highest amount of units that have been turned around in the last few years. I understand all that, but the need's also growing, right? And wait lists are long, and all these things. So it's not a criticism. It's a question and a challenge to all of us collectively. What more can we do? Realizing our investment to you, most of it's federally funded. It's a small investment, but it's a leveraged investment, right? And there's other ways we work with you as far as trying to, with county-owned land and right of first refusal and all those things. So it's more of a question. It's a plea, really. What else, in your opinion, what are the next steps? What can we do in this context where prices continue to rise and affordability continues to be a challenge?
Well, for purposes of avoiding negotiating against my agency in its efforts to acquire and develop properties, I won't be specific. To answer your question broadly, yes, we can absolutely be bolder. Yes, we could do more, but I want to caution you, because while we're developing at a faster pace with a level of throughput that is previously unseen, we also have to take stock and make sure that as we are moving this forward, we're doing it in a way that's responsible and sustainable. And so every single acquisition teaches us new lessons about not only our own capacity to partner with private sector and the county agencies, but also how we should be approaching communities. And so there's a great deal of that. So how can we do more? One of the broad ways that we can do more is frankly embracing the community ahead of this sort of sell off of properties that are owned by real estate investment trusts and families, and that's something we've worked at, developing those relationships, maintaining them, and trying to leverage them. That's the most obvious one, but I have to say also, the way that we're financing transactions doesn't allow us to include a line item for expenses around keeping families housed and helping them reach their fullest potential, but that's at a cost, right? And so that is also part of making sure that we have a healthy community that is reflective of our values. It's not enough for us to acquire a property. It's not enough for us to develop a property. It's great to get it out of the ground. It looks nice for about 5 minutes, but we have to be disciplined about how we keep it a value added investment for this community, and that's not just financial. So I think there.
And I know you all do a lot in that vein to try to support. One last question, and I'll turn to Mr. Friedson. Your property, UHOC, where you all live, the building. There had been some concern. I heard from a few constituents about the green space issue, and I want to get an update on that. There's concern that there's money used to pave over, and there's some concern from the community. And how are you addressing that, and what's the status of that?
So I appreciate you asking that question. Our office sits in the middle of a neighborhood, and it's, as you know, it's essentially an adaptive reuse without much adaptation. We're in that schoolhouse, and we've made it work. But because we serve customers daily, we also create a fair amount of traffic there. And so in our partnership with the neighbors and trying to be a good neighbor, we needed to move folks who were parked on the street into the back of the building. And so by right, we had the ability to put pervious surface on that area. Now, so there's this lore about it being a grassy knoll and so forth, but the truth of the matter is it was covered over with rocks and wasn't really a usable surface. But by right, we had the opportunity and ability to just do it with pervious surface. The issue is then in the inevitable winter, when it snowed, you can't really plow that surface, right? I mean, you can't do it. And so, unfortunately, we misread the regulatory environment and paved it. It's not, this notion that it's this huge parking lot is also false. So we paved it, and that way we were able to, in the winter, we were able to plow it and kind of continue business as usual without having an adverse impact on the rest of the neighborhood. So yes, there was a little bit of sturm and drang about that issue. We worked with the county executive's office and permitting to resolve it. We've gotten a waiver that allows us to continue using that surface lot until we're out of that building. We expect that'll be within the next 3 to 4 years, and that's where we are.
So waiver until you move out. That's basically the current
Correct.
best case scenario at this point. Okay, well, and that's been communicated to the community members and.
It has been. It's unfortunate that it took on the notion that we were being disrespectful, because I think if you asked the mayor of Kensington and the town manager, they were appreciative that we were actually trying to solve the problem that our business and of serving people creates.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I've heard some similar concerns about the green space, so I'm glad my colleague brought it up. A couple things. First of all, just a comment. I think thank you for the work that you do, and it obviously is critical work. And we talked earlier, and I won't repeat the statistics I talked about before in terms of the HIF and the need to create more housing, and in so doing more affordable housing. And I think your case in point, you used the term responsible and sustainable and disciplined. Those are the three kind of watchwords that I heard as you were describing what you do, and not your mission, but how you achieve that mission. And I think in many ways we're in the same boat, and it speaks to the fact that your model doesn't work unless you're building market rate affordable housing as well. That's what helps to fund the below market rate affordable housing, and that is true of public sector, nonprofit sector, and for-profit sector with the MPDU program. And so I think that we frequently get into this discrepancy when we talk about housing, that all housing is different and different levels support different groups, and the reality is that all housing supports housing, and we need more housing. And then we can figure out what are the smartest and most thoughtful programs that we can implement in order to address different areas of the housing market, just like any other marketplace, just like any other ecosystem. But in order to have a healthy ecosystem, every level has to work. And if the high-end level doesn't work, then the lower end, in terms of pricing, the lower end pricing doesn't work. It's an ecosystem, and it all, works together. And I think you really speak to that, and I appreciate the way that you kind of explain that early on, because, it is a broader conversation that I think sometimes is challenging for folks to have. And I think some of us in public office and in public leadership talk about it in a way that is damaging to the overarching goal of your mission, but also the broader goal and mission of just how do we get more housing, how do we create more supply, and how do we address not just the most vulnerable, which we obviously need to be focused as much as possible on and be as bold as possible, but how do we get as many housing units online so that we meet the demand that is clearly there, because currently 14% of the rental housing stock being built since 2000 just ain't going to cut it. And so I appreciate that. I had a similar question about the headquarters, though, while you're here. The other, besides the public green space that has been raised, the gym. So as part of the lease agreement, my understanding is the gym's supposed to be for community use. Could you just update us on the status of that?
Yeah, I want to point out the same individual who was displeased about the gym usage was the individual who pointed out this notion that we had taken away green space. And again, it's unfortunate because I made every every effort to have a direct conversation with that individual. I won't describe the manner in which I was approached to use the gym, but the question I left with that individual was very simple. It was that we are using part of that gym for the actual business of operating HOC. And would part of the gym suffice as used for public space? It is indeed in our 1987 drafted and executed lease of the property. And so, yes, theoretically, it's contemplated that this gym, which was frankly a smaller, a very old elementary school, but that space ought to be able to be used for public space. There were two things that occurred that prevented that. The first is that the actual board that was charged with managing the space was defunded by the county. That has nothing to do with HOC. And so no one actually even programmed the space for that use from the very beginning. The second is that we began to expand a bit and needed part of that space, had been using it as storage and a number of other things, but really are using it actively at this point. And so the moment that it became a real issue in the winter, we did what we always do. We tried to solve problems. And so the mayor, the town manager, a number of other folks came to see the space. We said, look, here is the half that is usable for folks. We had installed additional cameras, made sure it was accessible, and have actually met the letter of the request and beaten it, and have been waiting for folks to use it for months at this point. So I want to thank DGS because they actually were pretty stalwart in trying to work through reworking the lease itself. Risk management just came out recently and judged it to be fit for mostly elementary school-age children. And so we we installed a new water fountain. We had the bathrooms that were near there rehab. So there's a notion that when people ask us to do something, that we're unreasonable. Asking a question for clarity and pushing back sometimes isn't the same as being unreasonable, right? And so in my responsibility to the agency, but also to the neighborhood, I am required to ask certain questions. And when I don't get an answer, that's cast as our being unresponsive. It's unfortunate that it happened, but again, the building's there waiting for folks to use should they see fit.
I appreciate that. One last quick question. I know we got to end here, and this is all I've got. But HSC is also using some space that it was originally programmed for the incubator program. Could you just update us on where that stands and how long you expect to be there?
Sure. Happy you asked that question as well. So once again,
I'm just asking for clarity, just like you are.
This is normal course of business stuff, right? And so I can explain that very, very easily. We were operating in a Silver String space owned by a private landlord. That landlord had been promising us for the entire duration of the time I've been at HOC that they were going to make certain improvements to the operating environment of that building. They never did. And so we actually, at our own expense, installed, repaired, maintained the HVAC, as an example. And so at the point of lease renegotiation, I said very clearly to that landlord, listen, I can't continue to condone cutting a check for space for our customers as well as our employees that is substandard. And so, you promised us 2 years ago you were going to do these things. You haven't done them yet. And so, we need to talk about how we're going to manage this relationship. They came back, essentially evicted us from the space. That was their response. It was either eviction or pay 2 times the amount of the monthly lease. Both are unpalatable. The county at the time had a vacancy at a very nearby incubator space. It was supposed to be an incubator space. There were like 2 businesses in there. The majority of the space was vacant. We negotiated with the county's agent who's managing that space. We're paying market rate for the space, right? And the reason we did it was because we were purchasing a building, rehabbing that building because it's right near the Purple Line, and making it ready to serve customers. And so I want to. There's this notion that that we were done a favor. We were not. We're paying market rate for the space. It's proximate to the space where customers were already being served. We don't want to disrupt.
I appreciate it. I can only speak for myself. My frustration about that whole situation has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the lack of appropriate use for a space that was supposed to be for one purpose and wasn't being used. That it was vacant when you came upon it. That wasn't because of you. So
Right.
I wanted an update for that. How long do you just so we know how long do you expect to be there? 'Cause
We are vacating the space by the end of July.
in July, so of this year.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have no issues with the staff recommendation. Thank you for clarifying that for me. And again, I have no issues with your interest and the reason for why you wanted to occupy the space. I have some frustrations about that broader situation, but it's not related to HOC, so thanks.
Okay. And then the other issue you have is an amendment related to the CIP project for the demolition fund?
Yes.
Yeah. And so the executive has recommended moving 500,000 of the money from FY '20 to '21. This is a county assistance to HOC to cover a part of the cost of demolishing the Ambassador in Wheaton and Emery Grove Village. And so this is a movement of money, and I think it's all, yep, go
Can
ahead.
explain that also. So we were asked, and again, we try to help solve problems, to delay the demolition of Emery Grove. We're moving forward with the demolition of the current Ambassador building. I mean, it clearly needs to be demolished, and redeveloping that site. And so we're happy to delay Emery Grove's demolition to make an accommodation for timing issues, and that's really it.
Is it fiscal? Is that the reason why the request?
Yes.
It was, and this is
It's current revenue.
current revenue in the capital budget. So,
It freed up 500,000 of current revenue in '20 and it's moved to '21.
okay. And would you have absolutely have done it in 20 otherwise, or was this, this was okay?
We could have done it, but here's the thing. We're part of this community, and we're going to work hard to make sure that if we've got to move stuff around to make sure that this county is successful, we'll move stuff around.
Mr. Joyner.
I'm really glad the ambassador's coming down. That's where my campaign office was, and I can attest, as of 6 months ago, it's pretty crappy. So I'm glad.
for a campaign office, but not
Yeah. I'm glad you and Wilco have come to agreement, and that's gonna be a good thing, I think.
I am ever hopeful.
Yeah, good. All right.
Before you leave, any comments, concerns, questions about the overall county budget as we are going through our process?
You all have some difficult decisions to make. I don't envy you.
Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Sustainable, what did you use? Sustainable, responsible, and disciplined, right? Is that?
Sustainable, responsible, and disciplined. I think I might use your watchwords myself a bit.
And bold.
All right, thank you.